Streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and blasttheradio.com, this is The Lowell Green Show. The number to call and be heard around the world is 613-413-2217. Or email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. And now, here is Lowell Green.
Thank you, John. Well, Doug Ford listened to us, right? He's called for a public inquiry into the light rail fiasco. Now, I have to be honest. I'm not sure what the difference is between a public inquiry and a judicial inquiry. I'm not even sure, because it's so early in the game, whether he has discounted what we would call a judicial. But at least a public inquiry means that all of the evidence, etc., will be before the public, whereas any inquiry carried by the city would be in camera. In other words, we wouldn't have the faintest idea what had been dug up. So Doug Ford has listened, I believe, among other things, he listened to you. We did a program, I forget, John, if it was earlier this week or late last week, during we asked you, do you support a public inquiry? I pointed out at the time that Doug Ford was considering it. And the sentiment on this program overwhelmingly was, yes, we need a full-scale judicial inquiry. I phoned Doug Ford's office, and not shortly after the program. I told them that the sentiment, and they were very interested and very grateful, because they said they hadn't heard very much from the ordinary resident of Ottawa, and we're very pleased to see what people were saying on my show. And they asked if I could send them any comments that I received, which we did. We received maybe a couple of dozen, I guess, in support of an inquiry. So I sent them as well. So I suspect that it at least played a role. I'm not suggesting that it was because of our contribution, but I'm going to tell you, it sure as hell didn't hurt. And once again, and I've been stressing this almost all of my career, and that is that, folks, if you want politicians to listen, you gotta speak to them. It's not good enough to just, put something on Facebook or bitch your whine to your neighbor. If there are some politicians, and very clearly Doug Ford is one of them, who, if you speak up, will listen. They don't always do what you want, but at least they will listen. I have often said, and this has been verified many times, that all it would take to change a politician's mind on any particular issue is 100 emails or texts. And I'm going to tell you that very, very, very rarely will a politician get 100 emails or texts or comments from anybody. So just once again, folks, to remind you, I know that this ticks some of you off. This is a democracy. We all have a duty. I believe it is a responsibility in a democracy to take part in whatever way we can. If we feel there is something wrong, I think it is our duty to let our, in some cases, city council, provincial, federal, to know where we stand. Otherwise, I just don't see how you can complain. I mean, if you're not speaking up and letting our politicians, our leaders know what you want, then you can hardly expect them not to know what you want. So there we go. At any rate, now, I'm going to bring you in here, John.
Yeah,
my understanding was that apparently Jim Watson was on, I'm not sure whether it was the Rob Snow show or on CFRA this morning, but the information that I got was that he seemed to be pleased that the province was taking this inquiry over. But the information you have seems to differ from that.
So here's a story from the CBC. This was posted at 12:51 this afternoon. The tone of what he seems to be saying is very different from what you just expressed. He says, the CBC says, as the Ontario government pondered calling a public inquiry into Ontario's light rail system, Mayor Jim Watson sent a 5-page letter to the transportation minister extolling the city's due diligence work on the Confederation line and asking to discuss what the city had already done to investigate. So he's asking Minister Carolyn Mulroney for a fair opportunity to brief you, this is a quote, to brief you more fully on this important issue and to provide you with a full overview of the steps council is taking to examine the work of Rideau Transit Group and Trainmaker.
So John, very clearly what he is doing there is trying to dissuade Ford from having a public inquiry. That very clearly, that's the intent of that 5 pages.
And here's the quote that got me, that this doesn't sound like he's a very happy person today at all. He says, my only request to the province is please stop surprising us. Let us know in advance when you're going to make a decision that affects our taxpayers, our citizens, our passengers, and our employees, Watson said, adding the province hasn't once expressed any concern about the LRT in the last 2 years. Are you kidding me?
I mean, the fact of the matter is that about $2 billion of provincial money is involved here.
Yeah.
And not only has Doug Ford got the right to call for an inquiry, but I think he has the responsibility.
Not $2 billion. 2 years? Come on, Mayor Watson, I respect you, but I don't buy that for a second.
Jimmy isn't used to losing, you know. So if anybody has any comments on that, do you think this is a good idea? There was, as I recall, I think there was one person who thought that the expenses would be too great. By the way, it's very interesting because Ford says that this inquiry will not drag on and will be completed before the next municipal election, which is, by the way, next October 24th. So hopefully we will have all of the results, the conclusions of this inquiry before we get to vote for the next municipal council. In this regard, I must say that immediately after the show yesterday, I contacted my counselor, Eli Al-Shantiri, and asked him if he knew in advance that the city had been warned that this system had problems. We discussed this at some length yesterday. John Manconi, head of OC Transpo at the time, notified at least a number of city officials that there were problems here, that it required more work, more attention, as he said, than it should. So I asked Eli if he had been notified prior to accepting official delivery, if he had been notified that there were problems. And if he had not been notified, what did he plan to do to follow up on this? I have not as yet heard back from Eli Al-Shantiri. I expect, and Eli is usually very good at responding here, but I suspect that there are a few members of council up there right now doing everything they can to cover their ass. So the whole thing, John, is just an unbelievable fiasco. And as I said yesterday, and I said before, if there's anything that calls out for a public or judicial inquiry, it's this fiasco. Billions and billions of dollars on a project that may or may not ever work properly.
So by the time all phases of this are done, Lowell, we're talking close to probably $7-8 billion, correct?
Looks like it, yes.
And so they don't want a judicial inquiry because, as they're trying to say to us, I guess, is that they don't want that extra expense for the taxpayer, $20 million or whatever it is. That is a drop in the bucket. I don't know what that works out to percentage-wise. So
I suspect that that's just a scare tactic. There's no question.
What are you hiding? If you got nothing to hide, have the inquiry.
Absolutely.
I will give you my permission to spend that $20 million of my tax dollars. I want answers.
So if anybody has any thoughts on this, do you approve? Do you think this is a wise decision on behalf of Doug Ford? What do you think of the city's reluctance to have an inquiry on this? Are you suspicious about this? Does it surprise you? In other words, your comments. And before we go, I just once again want to thank you, all of you who took part in the program and spent enough time to send some comments, which I feel influenced the decision here.
That, by the way, Lowell, if people want to go back on the podcast, that was Friday's show.
That's Friday's show.
Yes, sir.
So thank you. If you took part, you had a say, good for you. Good for you. It's democracy.
Yep.
Democracy means everybody gets a say. On another issue, I am unsure if Ontario is really ready to start building or buying a lot of electric or hybrid cars. I'm a little worried about Doug Ford's decision to spend a lot of money, a big investment in the production of electric cars, and by the way, their batteries, which is very interesting, in this province. His aim, his goal is the production of 400,000 electric or hybrid vehicles within the next 8 years. I'm not sure if that's an obtainable goal. Um, one of there's a number of facts involved here. One of them is that since Doug Ford stopped doling out bonuses to the purchases of electric cars, remember under the Liberals, if you bought an electric car, you got a real nice government rebate. Yeah, it's not a government rebate; it was a taxpayer rebate. Doug Ford, one of the first things he did was stop that. But since he stopped these rebates, the sale of electric hybrid vehicles has declined in Ontario. As a matter of fact, the sale of electric hybrid vehicles is not very robust right across the country. 2 years ago, it's the last year that I have figures for, we sold about 5 million new vehicles of all kinds in Canada. Of that, only about 5% were electric or hybrid. I'm not sure if the situation has improved, but during 2 years ago, almost everybody who bought an electric vehicle was getting a real nice rebate. So Doug Ford, one of the things is that Doug Ford says that he may have to reinstitute some sort of a rebate. He's in response, I guess. Joe Biden says that he's going to give as much as $20,000 to anybody that buys an electric vehicle made in the United States. So, and rightly so, Doug Ford's worried about that for the Canadian auto industry. But I don't care. I don't know about you, but I am absolutely hotly opposed to paying any kind of a bonus or rebate to anybody that buys any kind of a car. If the car dealerships wants to do that, that's their business. That's private enterprise. But I deeply resent taxpayer money going to rebate anybody because they happen to buy an electric or hybrid vehicle. I just don't think that's right. Uh, you may disagree. You may feel that in order to sell more electric vehicles, that we're going to have to bribe people somehow. I just I've let Doug Ford know, whatever it's worth, that I am hotly opposed, and I'm not alone. He's under tremendous pressure, though, because as you can imagine, the opposition parties, especially the NDP, they're blaming Doug Ford for declining electric sales. Okay, well, it's because you stopped giving them rebates, etc. So the Liberals and the NDP would love to give rich people all sorts of money back to buy an electric vehicle. It's not enough, I guess, that in many places, including Ottawa City Hall, we now provide free fuel for people with electric vehicles. But I'd like to know where you stand on this. Do you think, are you personally, are you ready? And I know I asked this question maybe a couple of months ago. I'm asking it again in light of the fact that Doug Ford says he's going to press for 400,000 new electric vehicles within the next 8 years, by the year 2030. Are you prepared to buy one? And you know what? If some of you out there have bought one or a hybrid, love to hear from you. How is it working? How does it go? Is there a problem in cold weather? I'm just doubtful that we are ready to do that in this climate. I could be wrong. I may be wrong. Certainly, there's no question that there's a great emphasis. I mean, most of the automobile ads that you see these days are concerning electric vehicles. They're trying to. There's no question they're trying to push the electric vehicles as super cool, vehicles of the future, et cetera, et cetera. And advertising does work. So I don't know. What's your feeling here, folks? What's your feeling? What are you ready to do? Do you think that we'll be able to buy 400,000 new electric vehicles in the next 7-8 years in this province? I don't know. John, any comments on any of our topics so far?
Lots. By the way, I went out to a concert on Tuesday and I used Uber for the first time. Both Ubers, there and back, were hybrid vehicles, and both drivers loved them, so that they've had no problems.
Good. Okay.
One guy did say that he did in the past have an all electric and he would never do that again.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he said it was nothing but problems and expenses and cumbersome. Here we go. On Twitch, I don't think the technology has progressed enough to put total confidence into electric vehicles, batteries especially. Terry's wondering, can you drive an electric car on the LRT? Anne is asking, or Anne says she does not plan on buying one. Jax is in I want to say northern Saskatchewan. She says, I'd love to try a hybrid anywhere up north, she says, laughing. Big no to electric vehicles, says JP, watching on Facebook. No rebate, says Angel, watching on Twitch. The LRT is like every else the government tries to do, stuff it down our throats and expect all taxpayers' money to pay for it. No rebates for electric cars, says Sean. Patricia says she posted something about this last week and was called out on it by the fact-checking police. And there was a great comment a moment ago from Jason. He says, why should the taxpayers pay for someone to own a $100,000 Tesla?
Yeah, precisely my point. I would like some comment on whether you agree with Doug Ford's decision to call for a provincial public inquiry. I think that we need some more comment on that. Very clearly, Jim Watson, the bulk of City Council, I guess, is opposed. But do you think this is a good idea? It's going to cost some money, and it's going to take some time, although Doug Ford says they'll have her wrapped up in time for the next municipal election. But what I'd like to hear some comments, because I must tell you that I'm going to contact Doug Ford's office again after this show, and I'll let them know what people have to say. But in order for me to tell Doug what people have to say, I have to hear what people have to say. I want to hear comments about the electric vehicles, but I also would like to know, do you approve of the province holding this public inquiry? Do you think it will reveal anything? Do you think it will be worth the money, the time, et cetera, et cetera? Maybe one of the other questions I should ask is, or have you just lost total confidence that LRT will ever work properly? John, any more comments there?
Absolutely, and we welcome yours as well. We're at 613-413-2217. Whether you're watching on Facebook, on Twitter, on Twitch, on YouTube, you can post a comment, and it should pop up on the screen. Barry is first in on the phone at 613-413-2217. Lowell, I agree with the inquiry, and our mayor is lost in his own space, and he obviously thinks he can keep on feeding this BS to his asleep supporters and convince everyone that the province hasn't said or done anything about his toy train. It will be good to see if the mayor and his supporters have done anything wrong or illegal. If so, Watson should resign. Tara says the Dutch should be brought in to show them how to do this correctly. They have decades of experience and success, and their trains run 100% on wind turbine power. Joshua adds to the conversation saying, as if Ottawa Council didn't surprise us with a poor LRT. I guess that's in reference to Jim saying, stop surprising our taxpayers. Kathy weighs in to say, Watson wants to get involved and try to cover up what went wrong with the LRT. Craig doing the math, by the way, on the $20 million judicial inquiry. In the grand scheme of things, he says it would amount to about 0.333%. Thank you, Craig. Can always count on you for that.
Shields. Got to get a word in here for Shields.
Yes.
If you're in the market for appliances of any kind, I just want to alert you once more that as of January 1st next year, some of these appliances, lower cost appliances, are probably not going to be available. The government has decreed that only Energy Star appliances will be allowed to be sold, new ones, in Canada starting next year. And many of the lower cost appliances that many people appreciate, fridges, etc., are not Energy Star. So in all probability, some of the appliances that you have been, used to buying will not be available. And those that are available likely will be more expensive than you're used to paying. So, folks, I suggest if you're in the market for appliance, even though it may be not until next year, give Shields a chance here, okay? Go to shields.ca, SCHEELS.ca. Check out the appliances. Check out what they've got. It's in stock. And the prices are all there, and the savings as well. I've told you before that in many cases, you're going to save money, even from the big box stores. Don't buy all of the hike from the big box stores, okay? They know their business up there in Pakenham. They've been at this since 1947. They know how to make sales and to save money. Shields.ca. John, my old throat's giving out here. What else have we got?
You grab some water, and I will read some comments to you here. Chrissy is on Twitch. We sure don't need a disaster with the LRT to make the truth come out. Peter agrees, need an inquiry on the LRT. Todd says, good for Ford. There's something really corrupt with this, especially with SNC involved. Sean on Facebook, yes, we need a public inquiry into the whole LRT project, and trusting the city to do it is a joke, so let the province do it. Laurentian View Terry on Twitch says, the air has to be cleared once and for all, therefore an inquiry is a must. Doug, watching on Facebook, his opinion is, I expect the heat would also be electric. Probably not a great plan when the battery dies. Anne is back to say inquiry needed, and hopefully it will result in a solution to what seems like an ongoing problem with LRT. Back to the conversation about hybrids. Sherry just texted us at 613-413-2217 to say, had a hybrid, traded it in because the batteries are too expensive when they need to be replaced. There you go.
Yeah, excuse me. That's one of the problems. I'm not sure if it's been solved. This whole issue of batteries, how long they will last, how effective are they in our cold weather? I'm not sure. I have another topic here that I want to throw out. Inflation, almost 5% now. Now, for some people, that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but I want to tell you, this is the highest rate of inflation for 18 years. The last time inflation was this high was 2003. Not only is the inflation now, it's the officially 4.7, so they say, but it's climbing steadily. And all indications are that it's going to go much higher than that. In fact, there are some who are predicting that we could have inflation in the 7, 8, 9% range, which would be a disaster. One of the things, of course, if inflation continues the way it is now, the Bank of Canada is going to have to raise the interest rates, which means that everything, your mortgages, for example, are going to go up. I just don't know where it's all going to end. Food costs in particular. Now, they say that the rate of inflation is 4.7%. And there's been a separate study, actually several, which indicates that the ordinary basket of food in the past 6 months, has increased in this market, in Ontario at least, anywhere between 10 and 15%. That probably is what your assessment may be. I know that it's certainly Debbie's assessment here, that the average basket of food is up about 15% as far as we can determine here. As I say, I don't know where it's going to end. One of the things that and I talked about this briefly yesterday, is that it's driving more and more people to the food banks. That's always the food banks are the canary in the coal mine. It's a signal of more problems to come. In some cases, including here in Ottawa, the use of the food bank has almost doubled. And I mean, in many cases too, I want to make this plain. I've had some experience here. Sometimes the impression that you get of people in the food banks is not right. Many of these people who are using the food bank are working people. They're working, but somehow or other, somehow or other, the expenses have reached a point where they just can't afford enough food to feed their family properly. It's particularly serious with single women, only have one income and maybe looking after 2 or 3 children. And these are, in many cases, the people using the food bank. But where is it all going to end? I mean, we still have a federal government that doesn't seem the least bit concerned about inflation, still pumping billions of dollars out into the economy. Pierre Poilievre has been warning about this for the last 3 or 4 years, pointing out that the more money that you print, which is how money gets pumped out, you just print more money. It cheapens the money that's there and causes more and more inflation. I mean, I know that it may be a poor example, but don't forget, folks, at one point, not that long ago, Venezuela was one of the richest countries in South America. It had one of the world's largest oil deposits, had a very thriving oil industry. The socialist government took over, nationalized all of the industries, and as a consequence, began to print all kinds of money. I remember when we were in Venezuela, Debbie and I were in Venezuela a number of years ago. We were on a tour with a young man, and we went past a couple of stores, and there were big, long lineups of people. And I said, what are those lineups for? Well, he said they're getting their free food. And he was very opposed. He said, this guy from, the president was, in order to buy votes, was handing out free food. And every Friday, apparently, you could line up at various stores and get a whole basket of food. Well, somebody had to pay for that. And as a consequence now, I mean, Venezuelans, for many of them, are just reduced to a state of abject poverty. It's estimated that 3 to 4 million people have fled the country, gone into Colombia. So and inflation in Venezuela went to, I don't know, 100%, 200%. You had to take a whole wheelbarrow of money to buy a loaf of bread, if you could find a loaf of bread. I'm not suggesting that we'll reach that point, but you can't be careless with the economy. You cannot just continue to print money and throw it out without causing damage. And I'm going to tell you, if you speak to some of those people lined up at food banks, you will see there's damage already. If you don't think it's damaging for some of these people, proud people in most cases, having to line up at a food bank someplace and beg for food, you just don't understand human nature. Any comments on that?
Absolutely.
Go
And
ahead.
might I remind the listeners and viewers about what our prime minister said during the election campaign? He doesn't pay any attention to monetary policy.
You know, if you talk about, yeah, very true, very clear.
I mean, if that doesn't scare the hell out of you.
The evidence is there.
Yeah.
Take me for example. I don't have any pension other than the old age pension, which is what, peanuts, about $1,200 a month.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't even buy peanuts with it. I've been an entrepreneur all of my life, as many others out there. So I don't have a pension. Sure as hell don't have an index pension. If you have an index pension, then it's probably not hurting you. I mean, the more the cost of living goes up, the higher your pension goes up. So it's no big deal. But most Canadians don't have an index pension, and many Canadians don't have a pension. Many people are on fixed income. So if you're on fixed incomes, as I am, I'm not whining here. I've been careful. I'm not whining, but I'm saying that in my case, if you have 5% inflation, that means that any income that I do have has been reduced by 5%. They've just cut my pay 5%. And if next year it goes up 6%, then my pay is cutting another 6%. And yours too. That's what's happening here, folks. Any comments, John?
We currently have a government that doesn't take fiscal responsibility seriously, is one comment. Joshua adds, this is what happens when we fail in our duty to elect responsible government. Michelle is listening in Windsor, Ontario. She says, I'm a single working woman and I had to take in a boarder during a pandemic just to make ends meet. Energy prices are going up too, as well as food and rent. Glenn says, been there, done it, and survived, only to see it coming back 40 years later. Chrissy's on Twitch. She says, pardon me, Chrissy, I'm sorry, Lowell. The farmers and growers of fruits and vegetables, etc., they sure have to be worried. People will not buy as much in the prices increase. Definitely in factor, is my opinion as well. Lisa, just envision Trudeau sitting on his throne operating a printing press. Murray says, get prepared for interest rates higher than those of the early 80s. And Peter, regarding topic number 2, says, between inflation and carbon taxes, it's freaking insane. You notice the prices in supermarkets, public eateries are going up every few months. People like Trudeau have no clue that prices go up. Some of the comments.
And don't forget that, I mean, the carbon tax, which applies to everything, including heating fuel, gasoline, propane, etc. It goes up again. He's putting it up again, a big, healthy chunk next April. So, next April, we're going to see another big increase in the price of everything. I mean, I don't get it. And as I've said before, if there is any evidence anywhere that a carbon tax lowers emissions, I have yet to find it. It sure as hell, the province with the longest lasting carbon tax is BC. And we find out that, guess what? Emissions have gone up more in BC than almost any other province in this country. And they have a huge carbon tax there. It doesn't work. You know why? One of the reasons, hey, you got to heat your home. You can turn the thermostat down a couple degrees. You have to drive to work. You've got to get to work. Cities like Ottawa have got to provide buses, et cetera, et cetera. It all requires fuel. Trucks. Have any idea how much fuel the trucks are burning? I mean, it's immense. Almost all of the food that you see in the grocery store has got to be trucked in. And every single year or even more, the carbon tax that those truckers have to pay continues to escalate. Well, guess who has to pay it in the end? $28 for a pound of steak. You got it. John, more comments. We're almost out of time here.
Back we go to northern Saskatchewan, and Jackie says, would love to see Trudeau come to see the state of some of the houses I or my community partners are in on a regular basis. Jackie is part of the RCMP, by the way. It is a vicious cycle, says Chrissy, and I've got a question. So the hell that we're seeing in British Columbia, Vancouver is cut off from the mainland right now. It's our biggest port. What is your feeling on how that is going to affect prices as well? Not just the taxes on all this stuff, but now we can't even ship stuff across the country by truck. We can't get it from Vancouver to anywhere.
Well, it's not only that. That's very true. What a tragedy. No question about it.
Sure.
But there's another aspect here. And that is that very clearly the federal government is going to have to pour billions of, and I mean billions of dollars in there. So here is one more example of where when the times were good, we were spending like drunken sailors. Apologies to drunken sailors. And we ran up, even in good times, we were running up huge deficits. So now there comes emergencies, and the situation in BC is an emergency. We're going to have to pump more billions and billions of dollars into there. Well, where's that money going to come from? I mean, it's just, and in the end, it's going to create even more inflation. The fact that we can't get some of the products that normally we would get from Vancouver is one aspect. But the money, the billions that are going to have to be pumped into there, that's, folks, I can't even guess how much money it's going to take to bring that province back to normalcy. John, I just want to alert everybody that I have a little appointment at the Heart Institute tomorrow, a little bit of blood work, so I will not be on the show. But I just want everybody once again to thank you for taking part. And hopefully we'll be back on Monday. Thank you all.
The Lowell Green Show is seen and heard live around the world at 2 p.m. Eastern. Connect with us online at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Download the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green podcast. This is a production of blasttheradio.com.